In Minnesota, sex trafficking and prostitution takes on untraditional forms that challenge the common portrayal of the sex industry, using coercion and fear to exploit the vulnerability of women.
Minnesota defines sex trafficking as the receiving, recruiting, enticing, harboring, providing, or obtaining by any means an individual to aid in the prostitution of the individual, or receiving profit or anything of value, knowing or having reason to know it is derived from sex trafficking. In Minnesota, this happens to a lot of women. Women who have escaped the life and have grown strong enough to share their stories are building awareness and helping others get away from the vicious cycle that is the sex industry.
My seed of abuse began when I was 15 years old.
As a survivor, mentor, and advocate, Terry Ferliti works with Breaking Free to provide a safe place and pathway for victims.
Terry's first sexual encounter took place after her boss took her out to dinner and a movie.
And then he took me to his apartment, and once we got there, he asked if I wanted something to drink. I didn't know what I hadn't drank before. And then he laid a blanket on the ground, and he brought me to the floor and proceeded to have sex with me. Now, I was petrified, but I didn't scream and yell because I was so afraid. So I let that go. I didn't recognize it as rape, which it was. And he took advantage of a vulnerable child at 15. Shortly after that, a number of other events occurred that made it very traumatic in my life. And I was starting to lose it. I was starting to lose my sense of reality, what was going on. I couldn't keep up anymore. And that's when I got hooked on cocaine. I immediately loved it. It took me out of this world into another one that was safe for me.
Many women who are involved in sex trafficking become dependent on drugs through the hands of their pimps. Doing drugs becomes a cycle of escaping from the world and coping with their situation, which only complicates the problems and makes it harder for them to leave the life.
I had met a guy at the airport. I fell in love with him. Well, he had the same party style that I did. So it was a lot of cocaine. He got me involved in a lot of group sex type things. And I felt sick to my stomach after I was involved in these trysts, as you will. And I just started becoming more and more hopeless, helpless. I felt that I don't have a future. And I continued with this man until I married him. And we had 2 children. And after our second or third wedding anniversary, he came in and said he wanted a divorce. He ended up getting the kids because he quit doing the drugs. And I still had drugs in my system. Now that my kids were with him, I really didn't have any purpose of living, I thought. So I continued on that path for a while until Thanksgiving of 1999, when I met a man at a crack house off of Lyndale and Franklin. I thought it would be convenient to hang around him because he had cocaine. And he was hanging out with a lot of former pimps. And he was a former pimp himself. At this time in 1999, he was not really pimping like I thought a pimp would be, but he actually ended up pimping me.
The recruitment can happen from peers, their boyfriend, and you're like, hey, I thought of this way to really make money. And maybe at first it starts out as they're not trying to traffic you. Oftentimes, though, that person has ulterior motives in mind, and it becomes much bigger.
If you step back, there are market forces and pimps, facilitators, and operations behind all of that, kind of pulling the kids into it, either by force, by rape or gang rape, or by luring them in with false promises.
So what happened was we were at our apartment in Hopkins, and Poochie went out to get more drugs. So while he was gone, somebody came to the door. I let him in. He'd say, well, I've got a little bit of cocaine here. Do you want to use some? And I'd say, oh, no, thanks. I don't have any money. He'd say, no, this was free. And so naturally I did the cocaine. And then when it was gone, he said, all right, why don't you come over here and sit next to me? And before I knew what was happening, he was all over me. He said, bitch, this stuff isn't free. And I knew right then and there I had been had. Little did I know that Poochie had set that up. He had already gotten money from this guy. And that's what happened to me. That's how I was turned out.
Not almost. It's a psychological conditioning grooming process. And it gets to be this power dynamic in play. That grooming process occurs not only just when it's like with your boyfriend, but also with a trafficker that has multiple girls.
They are told over and over by traffickers and other people in the marketplace that they're not worth anything as human beings. That if anyone knew what they were doing, that they would be judged, that they might be put in jail. Everything about that marketplace is designed to degrade the young people who are victimized.
Well, and then after that happened, I shut up, and I didn't realize still at this point that I was involved. It wasn't until this happened a few more times. I never flirted. I never wore nice costumes. I never walked the street. I never made a back page ad. This is another form of prostitution. You can be bought and sold without even knowing about it. It takes somebody that's very vulnerable, that doesn't know what's going on, that has a lot of other things going on. I already had trauma. I already had low self-esteem. I didn't have my kids anymore, so I felt worthless. I felt like a failure, that I was the failure. So what happened to me in one of these times when I got in someone's car, somebody did rape me with a bottle. And I ended up getting injured and cut up. And I was so happy that happened, because that kept me from having any kind of intercourse for a while. So what I was looking at is I was going to have to do some time in Hennepin County, Ramsey County, and Dakota County. During that time, I found out I was pregnant. After about a month and a half, I started thinking, you know what? I want to change my life. I don't want to do this anymore. I started getting some clarity. I surrendered to my God, and I said, Father God, you need to help me. I want to have this baby. I want to be a normal person. I want my life back. I want to be a good mother to my 2 other kids. While I was in Hennepin County Jail, somebody from Breaking Free, which I'd never heard of, came.
Breaking Free is a nonprofit organization committed to helping women climb out of and recover from being entrenched in sexual exploitation by providing housing, support services, education, and advocacy.
I have a great relationship with my children, all of them. It's a wonderful thing. It's very hard. Still to this day, there are years and years that are gone. And we can't do anything about getting them back. But I don't have to look back. I can look to the future. And now I can help other girls. I get to help other girls.
Sex trafficking is everywhere, and it affects everyone. It is our responsibility to be informed and aware of what is really going on with our women, in our city, and on our streets.